more practicing. We are going through a practicing of all the different sections. And today I'd like to be more interactive. So instead of me trying to, go through the question, I'd like that for each one of the question, any one of you that is brave, or I don't say brave, come on, we are here all to learn, so it's a safe environment. I'd like that each one of you kind of step in and kind of walk through the answer with some explanations. So we are kind of having a kind of a two-way conversation. And let's try to do that. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so please just volunteer for one of the questions. Okay, anyway, let's go through the material today. We are going to touch a few arguments, a few topics, sorry. The topics are less technical, more, I would say, bureaucratics, because we're trying to understand what are the sovereign regions. Then we look into the price calculators options, the cost management, SLAs, and then some public preview and upcoming features, stuff like that. So this is less of understanding the cloud, the Azure cloud services, more things that are on top of them. So today we are not going to talk about compute, we are not going to talk about network or storage or you name it. It's more about today to understand how you calculate the cost, the SLA and stuff like that. As you know, some of those topics we have briefly touched them the day before, but today we are going to kind of consolidate all the knowledge that we had before. Okay. We actually already mentioned to you earlier that Azure has multiple independent networks or independent data centers. And those data centers pretty much they're defined as sovereign regions. What does it mean? It means that they are dedicated data center with dedicated network, but that are not crossed with the standard public Azure cloud. As I mentioned earlier, there are three main important data centers for this. One is the Azure government, which is only for US governments. Then there is for Azure China and for Azure Germany. While the only one that is dedicated to government is the Azure government cloud. For China and Germany, instead, are pretty much they're not dedicated to the government, but they're dedicated to different compliance and different regulation that they have in those two countries. Again, there is if for a standard Azure cloud data center, there is no real clarity where they sit or where they are located. For the Azure government and the China and Germany, there is even more unknown, let's put it like that. Of course, if you go and Google Probe, most likely you find some information where that potentially could be. But this is how Microsoft tried to segregate those networks and keep them even more safer. Why there is a need of this? Because of different compliance, regulation, security, data ownership, and stuff like that. As we have seen probably a couple of questions already, there might be some question that they say to you, which are the data center that are dedicated to government? In the case, only one, which is the US one. How many the different network there are in Azure? Well, in total 4. Those 3 that we saw here, plus the public Azure network, and so on and so forth. So now, when are we talking about cloud? Probably the most important things that comes to our mind is the Capex versus Opex concept that we see on day 2 of this training. Now, of course, everybody try to manage and save cost, and so how do you do that? So in the standard Capex model, which is where you're going to purchase your server, install it in a server room, then you need to put in place power backup, cooling systems, networks, facility management, stuff like that. That is a pure cost. Now, by using a cloud services, as we have seen on those 3-4 days of training, you have understood that you don't need to care about all those components because they are provided by Microsoft into the Azure cloud. But what you need to understand is that, so how am I going to pay for the services that I'm using? And in that case, you have a cost that is per consumption or pay as you go, as is many times described. How does it? What is the cost? What are the factors that affect those costs? The resource type. So, for example, a server or a virtual machine, a storage. It could be a disk storage or a database. The network, the platform as a services, the software as a services. Each one of these resources has a different way to be priced, and that you can see that you have what called usage meter. So, for example, for a virtual machine, you is by the hours that the compute is running. For for the network, you will see how many hours the IP address has been used. For data, you have the quantity or the megabyte or megabit or gigabit, or what is the measurement or what is the amount of data that is transferred in and out. The standard managed disk operation in the case is like how many write, delete, read of a disk you are going to do in a month. Typically, the unit is the month, and so on and so forth. You can understand that each resource type has its own meter, as it's called. And therefore, if the meter is by hour, you will be billed by the hour that you use the resources. If the meter is by gigabit, you will be billed by the gigabits of data that is in and out, and so on and so forth. Then another cost is is pretty much the services that another factor that affect the cost is the service that you are going to use. So you can just go on the public Azure and sign up for a standard account. In the case, you will pretty much have a public available price list. Then eventually, if you are an organization, you can go and sign up a special agreement with Microsoft, what is typically called EA or Enterprise Agreement, and therefore you might have discount prices compared to the different to the price list. Or, for example, in our case, we can resell Azure to our customers. So we, as Accenture, we have what's called CSP, Cloud Service Provider Agreement. So let's assume that one VM, it costs $100 per hour, and that's the public list. We, as Accenture, under the CSP agreement, get it for $80. Then we put on top another $10. So we can go back to the customer and say, Mr. Customer, I can sell you 1 hour of compute for $90. He saved the $10 between the price list of 100 and the 90, and we make $10 on top. And those are the different way that how the price can be different. Last but not least, keep in mind that the price are based on the location. So if you are using a server in US and the same server has been provisioned in Australia, not necessarily the costs are the same. Especially this is true for bandwidth and stuff like that. Country where the bandwidth might cost more or internet costs more, of course, Azure is going to charge you more and stuff like that. So on top of this, those are the how can you reduce the cost. So those are the typical costs and what is called pay as you go or by consumption. Now, for example, you can see that there are different ways to reduce costs. Now, the first is that instead of pay as you go, you commit to pay the same resource for 1 full year or for 3 years. What does it mean? That the unit price goes down. Therefore, you have an incentive. If, for example, you have a production server where you're running an SAP application, therefore is a key, you are absolutely sure that this server will not be switched off in the next 3 years. So you can commit to Azure that you are going to use the server for the next 3 years, therefore the cost will be much, much cheaper. Just to give you an order of magnitude, if on a pay-as-you-go you pay 100, most likely on a 3 years resource instances you are paying something like 40, so less than half. So which is the reason why you are going to make an advantage. The downside is that if, for example, that server after 1 year you don't want to use it anymore, you still need to pay for the whole 3 years. So you need to be careful what you decide to reserve. Reserve capacity as something that instead is used more for the you pretty much commit on the total maximum capacity that you use for a server, for resources, and therefore you have a different price reduction. Then you have a hybrid, which is pretty much a mix between pay-as-you-go, reservist, and resource capacity, or there is a spot price. Spot price is a mechanism where pretty much you are bidding for extra capacity. So let's assume that Azure has 10 VMs, and if at one point in time Azure is only using 9 of those VMs, is pretty much selling the extra VMs for as little as possible. So you, as a customer, you get an advantage, but the problem is that you're not guaranteed to have the VM for a long time at that price. So in that case, it's good, for example, to do some testing, and if the VM is not available, at least you're not disrupting production and stuff like that. So you can see that on top of the standard cost, you have option to reduce the cost. Now, when you're looking into the billing, there is a concept of billing zones. Now, don't confuse the availability zone that we've seen before with the billing zone. So because it's a different concept. What the billing zone does is pretty much group resources that you are deploying into one of those billing zone into one and only invoice. If you have resources across different billing zone, you will have multiple bills, multiple invoicings, because of the way that they are pretty much grouping those components. So you can see here that there are 3 billing zones. Zone 1, which includes United States, US government, Europe, Canada, and others in this region, like in Europe. Zone 2, which includes pretty much Asia and Australia. And Zone 3 that include pretty much South Africa, UAE, Middle East, and South America. Then you have the independent zone of Germany, because of course it goes through with the concept of having their own specific regulation and stuff like that. Pricing calculator. So I'm pretty sure that you guys have been asked or not. Have you thought about, okay, this is so cool, but how do I estimate if I need to put together a proposal, or if the client come to me and say I need to move half of my application into the cloud, how much is going to cost? Azure provides you 2 main pricing calculator. One is the pricing calculator where you pretty much go into this website here, azure.microsoft.com, en-us pricing/calculator, and you will be prompted with this look and feel page. In this pricing calculation, you pretty much are going to build up the services that you need to be priced. So you're going to put virtual machines, you're going to put probably storage, probably some network components. Now, what is important to understand is that you need to build this in, if you're not the solution architect, you need to build this in conjunction with the solution architect, because don't be fooled to put together just a virtual machine and that's it, because that is not a realistic price. You need to put a virtual machine, storage, then for sure some network, because there is data in and out. Then maybe you need to put a firewall, then you need to put some backup components, and so on and so forth. So you can simplifying and say, okay, typically, for example, when we do not have enough information, at least myself, I've been using the calculation quite extensively. So if we do not have enough information, yes, pretty much what you do, you add for example, in the calculator, you go there, you add a virtual machine, then you select within the virtual machine, for example, the type of virtual machine, the number of cores, the quantity of RAM, on the storage type, SSD, HDD, then if it is primary storage or no primary storage, and those are all components that affect the overall cost. Then you add the storage itself, and the storage could be, as we see in the previous version, could be disk storage, could be blob storage, could be table storage, and so on and so forth. And again, you need to select the quantity, the input, the IOPS components in terms of how many times are you writing, editing, and stuff like that, and then you add this on the kind of the bill of materials. Now, all those components, almost all of them, they are affected by, the cost is affected by which zone are you placing them? So if you're putting a server in US, will have a space like a cost. If you're putting the same exact server with the same specs into Australia, you potentially have a different cost. Now, there is also so how do we, once you log into the Azure portal, you have actually an option under the portal that is called Azure Cost Management. What it does, it kind of give you some report or some insight of how much are you spending. So as you can hear, there are kind of three main components. Recommendations, so it tells you, for example, well, this virtual machine you'll be using the whole full month, why don't you put a reservation on the machine? In the case, it can tells you that right away you can save 40 to 60%. Again, here you have some Power BI and reports and cost analysis that allow you to again go and drill down into the cost assessment. And also you can have some notification or alert according to some budget. You can put budget towards the resources, and when the resources are close or cross those budgets, you can be notified by alert and stuff like that. Again, yeah, there is also another good tip here. Do not confuse the Azure Advisor with the cost management. The Azure Advisor, as we saw yesterday, it helps you with security threat, it helps you with efficiency and stuff like that. Here is purely to assess the cost, and that's it. Now, the second calculator that sometimes the answer, the question is asking you is about the TCO, the total cost of ownership. No. So while the previous is just a spot calculator where you say, where you go to the client and the client say, yeah, you know what, I'd like to move a couple of workload from my on premises to the cloud. The total cost of ownership, instead, it allows you to pretty much estimate the overall cost and overall cost of ownership of your existing data center into the cloud. How does it do that? Well, it's going to ask you more questions. It's going to be more of a checklist and more of an assessment, and therefore it can tell you the difference. So you can see that, for example, here for the same implementation, this simulation here in the picture is pretty much telling you that the cost of the data center is 93% and is $30 million. While here, the cost of the same implementation into the Azure is going to cost only $500,000. Now, don't take those numbers as good, because I don't know what is behind. To me, it seems to be very weird that there is so much difference. But the concept is that in this TCO calculator, you can actually estimate how much will be on compute, how much is in data center. And data center, we mean facility management, storage, floor plant, rack, cooling system, networking, and stuff like that, the network and the storage. You can see that by definition, the data center cost into the Azure is zero. Why? Because it's embedded into the network cost, embedded into the storage, embedded into the compute. Now, please do not be fooled by those numbers. I personally don't think that they're realistic. This is just really a picture that probably has been advertised by Microsoft to say how cool and how much you can save, but I don't believe that this is realistic unless here they're thinking about this is the cost per 1 year. Maybe it's fine, but then a total cost of ownership, it does not make sense to be just 1 year calculation.
Ivan? Sorry to interrupt. Typically, is there a ratio? Is there is there a norm on what the expected saving is? So generally, is there like a 20% or 10% or X% saving when you move from to the cloud?
There's no really a ratio, because depends a lot into how you design your infrastructure. Is very high available, is not high available. You have one data center versus 3 data centers. So there's no ratio. But according to my experience, I can tell you that the break-even time, so when the cloud does not make any sense, is if you cross the 6-7 years. So if you want to put down an investment into your data center, and if you plan to have that data center running for 10 years, probably the cloud is going to. But then there is also an argument that no hardware will last for 10 years. So then, every 5 to 7 years, you need to repurchase hardware because it's going to be running out of life. So in a nutshell, I would say that if you have a TCO for 5 years, most likely the Azure is going to cost less. If the TCO is more than 5 years, well, it can be debating. But this is according to my experience. But there's no really ratio, as I said before. It depends a lot on the design.
Okay, thank you, Ivan.
No problem. Okay,
Ivan, sorry, it's a short question. The tool, if may I, the tool for the cost calculation is public. So I mean, everybody can go there and simulate the price. So for example, also competitor of.
Absolutely, I can show you right away. Azure TCO. They're all public tools. Of course, the difference that because if you have an account under our agreement, you will get the prices that we pay, therefore that we can resell to the client. But if you go there, you pretty much have just a standard pricing list. So that will be the benchmark for you to give to your customer. You see, under pricing, you go under Azure.com, Microsoft.com. You have a pricing tab here. You have the pricing calculator, which is the calculator that we saw before, and you can see here that, for example, here I have already some. I didn't log in yet, but here, for example, just this is not exam oriented, but actually I think it's a very good things to know. So if, for example, you want to create a virtual machine and see how much it costs, under the pricing price calculator, is that where you build your cost. So you go here, virtual machines, and you add one virtual machine. Now you go down here, see that I have now a virtual machine. You can give a name, so the report will give you a name. So you can say test VM, because then you can export this in Excel. So you select where is the virtual machine located. Okay, my client is in Switzerland. Let's put it in Switzerland West. Mm-hmm. Which operating system? Windows, Linux, or Windows. Let's say that we do not want to pay a license, so we go into Linux. And here you have a choice of which Linux you want. CentOS, Red Hat, Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the one that is absolutely free because it's the free version of Linux. Which standard? Low, basic, low priority, or standard. This means that how what is the dedicated resources that we are using. Here again is where you select the type of VMs, and you can see that this has one virtual CPU and 3.5 gigabit of RAM. Therefore, you cannot run, let's say, an SAP work engine, but you can scroll down and you can have like really big virtual machine. This one is 64 CPU, 128. But to give you an example, this one that is selected here is called a D2, and it has D2 version 3. It has 2 virtual CPU and 8 gigabit of RAM and 50 gigabit of temporary storage for the operation system. Now you can see here the cost per month average is 136. Now, if you click here and you want, instead of you have the need of using a big one, look at the difference in the cost. PAM, $21,000 per month. So that's why you need to be sure that when you select the virtual machine, you need to have someone, if you're not the person that is designing, of clearly understand the concept of how many CPU I need, how much RAM I need, and how much temporary storage. Now, as I was mentioned before, this is you pay as you go. So if you turn on the machine, the whole month, the month is estimated to be 370 hours. That's how much you pay. Let's say that this machine, you're going to turn it on only 2 days per month. In this case, you have only for 48 hours. See that this drastically goes down to $600 per month. And this is how it works pay as you go. Now, the reserve instance, it works on, you pay pretty much, you commit to pay that for 1 full year. And you can see that, for example, let me go back. Let's say that you're using this machine the whole month is 370. It's $21,000. Then you say, guess what? I want to use this machine for the whole. I know that this is an SAP machine. I know that I cannot switch it off. So I need to pay anyway 370 hours per month. So let me reserve for 1 year. And the price goes from 21 to 12. Guess what? I'm committed to use this machine for 3 years. Again, 5,000. So see the massive discount that you can get. But then there's no way, you cannot way out of this contract because you will pay anyway the whole things. So, but this is how, and this is how you kind of shape the virtual machine. They say, oh, guess what? I need to add also a storage. click on storage. Again, it add below the storage.
We put all the components.
Select what you have, and at the end, guess what? You are going to have a nice build where you can also export in Excel. This is not for the total cost of ownership. This is for the first components where we have pretty much put together just an estimation of moving 3 workloads from the client data center to the cloud, or is a new workload. Now, the total cost of ownership is here again, and again is completely public for you to play around. You get here and you go through an assessment. So what are the server, what are the database, and here you add the workload, you add the database, you add the storage, and then it make you estimate. So you go through a step by step, then you adjust the assumption, and at the end you see the report. So what I want to say is that if you use the public calculation, the price that you see here are the public price list. But us as Accenture, we have typically under the CSP, which stands for Cloud Service Provider, we have a discounted price, and therefore we can resell those things to our customer where the customer still pay less than the public list, and we make money on top. Don't it make sense?
Okay, so the public list, everybody can, or everybody can come in this portal. Right. So also the man from the street, and also a competitor of Azure.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
However, I would imagine that. Sorry, Ivan. I would imagine that Accenture provides discounts to selected customers, selected of our clients. So it would be easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I would imagine that it would be easier or better for Accenture, our sales team, to provide the TCO, as opposed to recommending our clients go to this website and create and find it themselves, right?
No, but it's something that we never say to the client, go to the website and do it yourself. We do exactly what you say typically. So there are 2 ways that we do with the way that we kind of quote for our customer. Number 1 is that the customer might have already an enterprise agreement. Therefore, the customer itself already have a discounted price. And you will hear this saying, oh, my customer has an EA, enterprise agreement. Therefore, he already has, let's say, 5% discount from the price list, whatever is their agreement. That's individual by customer by customer. Option number 2 is where we as Accenture have a 15% discount, 15, on pay-as-you-go consumption. Therefore, roughly, you can remove 50%. But then we don't typically give the whole discount to the customer. We keep a percentage for ourselves because it's part of our job. Let's put it like that. Typically, we sell people to do the job, but then in this case, we have an option also to resell services from Azure. So if we get a 15% discount, we can lift up 5 to 8% and give to the end customer a total of 7 to 8% discount compared to the price list, but we keep 7 to 8% ourselves, if it makes sense.
Thank you.
Hey, Ivan, I just have a quick question. Just touching on your point, what is the value add of someone being a resale, like CSP, Cloud Service Resale Provider, but instead of the client just going and getting themselves an enterprise agreement? So what incentive does the client has to come to Accenture? What value add do we provide, basically?
So under the specific Microsoft CSP contract, we are pretty much taking care for the client about the invoicing, reporting, and we are responsible for level 1 support. So and also maybe the enterprise agreement that the client has might be only a 5% discount. So we can give them somehow a higher discount. Then, of course, there are clients that say they don't believe on those things, and they kind of say, oh, no, why should I pay you more when I can get it less? In reality, you need to think about that. If the client goes direct into the enterprise agreement, then you need to take care by himself about the invoicing. Then you need to take care about himself about level 1 support that instead we are obliged to provide. So there are some incentives. And anybody in this call, because I'm part of the resale team, so I'm very familiar with those things. Anybody in this call that will need any help in the future, I'm happy to step into a call or stuff like that for those things. No problem whatsoever.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool.
So Ivan, Sean here.
Yeah.
So in this context, what we are learning about the cost, I never see. I mean, so far, I never see there's a spell out about the concept of deployment impact, like private, public, or hybrid. Is that not taken into the consideration?
For the exam, no. For the exam, we are talking about pure Azure public cloud for the example purposes. But because at the end of the day, if you do a pricing calculation, if you are a private cloud, with Azure in this calculator will not know how much it costs your internet connection, how much it costs your power bill, how much it costs your cooling system. Do you have this in your own building, and therefore you don't need to rent the data center space, or you are into a co-location data center. So for the example point of view, is something that we are not covering in real life. If you need to do an exam, an assessment or a calculation for a hybrid cloud. In Accenture, we have some specific tools. I'm actually also part of the Accenture hybrid cloud team. So again, if you guys need any support on those things, I'm happy to step in and help you.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Oh, this is interesting. I think that those are the real things that probably are the most important things for us when we are trying to do respond RFP or sell things to the client. So this is, I'm happy that you guys are asking questions to those key elements. And also I can bring to you like direct experience, because on a weekly basis, at least a couple of times on the Azure calculator. So probably is one of the things that I really know deep inside. Thanks for the question, guys. Perfect. Now, how do we minimize the cost? Well, there are different ways to minimize the cost, like do some analysis, monitoring with Azure Advisor. Then you can put some threshold and say, I cannot spend more than, I don't know, $10,000 on these specific categories. And then again, as we mentioned yesterday, we can apply tags, and therefore I can report and say, oh, those VMs with tags equal with the billing equal, I don't know, with the department equal, the development are spending too much, stuff like that. Service level agreement. So the SLA is something that is one of the few things that with also the Active Directory definition that you kind of need to remember. Those are the key things that you need to try to remember, no? So if we have an SLA of 99%, it means that potentially you have 3.65 days of downtime. Now, for some application, for some usage is acceptable, but if you have a global website that should be up and running almost every single minute, and you have, because you have a global reach, I think the 3.65 days of potential downtime is not acceptable. So this is typically called 2 nines. This is 9.99999 is 5 nines. So in that case, I guess we get to a point where it's almost always up and running. And just by calculation, you can have the 5.26 minutes of potential downtime. Now, the SLA pretty much is a document that specifies the terms on which Azure will be committed to have resources up and running. Is a commitment. Therefore, if you have a way to measure that these 5.96 minutes are 7 minutes, potentially you can go back and request some compensation. Compensation typically are given in terms of credits. They're not never given in terms of money compensation. For each one of the services, if you go into the specific pages, you will see the individual SLA. And also SLA define what happened if to a service to designate. Okay, yeah, the case pretty much it tells you that each one of the SLA. So, and when you combine systems, the result is the combined SLA. So, for example, here I have a traffic manager, which pretty much split my internet traffic through multiple web app according to the balance. So the traffic manager has an SLA of 99.99%. Therefore, here will be roughly, I don't know, just it means that you potentially have a downtime more than 5.26. But to make it simple, to calculate how much that is, you can pull out the calculator. Okay, so to calculate how much is the downtime, so we need to get the 0.01 divided by 100 because we are talking about percentage. So this is how many. What this is the how much is downtime. So in this we need to multiply by 365 days. Then we multiply by 24 hours per days. It means that in a year with this 99.99, you are then we can multiply by 60. We're getting minutes by 60, 52 minutes and 56. So in a year, in this scenario, potentially your traffic manager is down for almost 1 hour, which could be acceptable or not. Then when you go into a region A, region B, the reason why you split between regions is because if you stayed only in one region, if one region goes down, then the result of SLA is pretty much the multiplication by 99, by 99.95, by 99.99. While by splitting instead, you are pretty much taking less chances that both of the regions are down at the same times. And that's how you need to think and design the high availability. Again, these all apply for infrastructure as a services. When you're talking about platform as a services or software as a services, this whole concept of combined SLA is all taken care of by Microsoft. Now, let's remember a few of the things how they work. No, so if the services, for example, for app services, Azure provides you a 99.95% availability. Azure Directory is 99.9, but we remember that this was only for the basic. Into the standard, actually, it could be there's no SLA whatsoever. Why? Because you don't pay any penny. Now here you have a quick calculation. Actually, it was the same calculation I was trying to do before on how from 90 to 99, 99.9, 99.99, and so on and so forth. What are the potential downtime per week, per month, and per year? And that gives you an understanding. For example, if you combine two services, if we go here, you have two services, 99.95 and 99.9. The overall availability is actually the multiplication of the two, and it tells you here. So you have a 99.95% times 99.9. It means that combined, those two have an availability of 99.858089. So a combination of two services, because both can potentially fall, is actually resulting into a lower availability for the overall solution as a block. This is important to account when you are putting together services and design for your customer, and you need to guarantee what is the SLA or the uptime guarantee to the design. Then if you split into two blocks, in the case you increase the overall availability. In the case by putting the traffic manager up front, you split the workload into two different regions. You increase the availability. Without the traffic manager and with only app services and SQL, you will have a kind of a combined availability. The exam typically tells you, it doesn't make you calculate availability, but it tells you, for example, if I combine two services, what is the availability will be increased, decreased, multiplied, sum, or whatever. So you need to know the concept of a block with two or more components. The total availability is the multiplication of the single availability. How do you increase? By putting some traffic manager, load balancer, and so therefore you can duplicate some of those things. Public private feature preview feature. So when Azure is planning to release some of the feature, those features can be, you can sign up to be a previewer, and can be a public preview or a private preview. A private preview, you need to sign up and you are going to accept. A public preview instead is something that is available for everybody to test, but pretty much, and therefore you can just try it out without signing up. The difference is that you need to be sure that there is no SLA for the preview feature, because they pretty much Microsoft is using you as a beta tester. They typically they release the life cycle for new feature for Microsoft goes from private preview, public preview, and then go out for everybody. So for everybody. So typically those features are for free, because you are helping them to develop and see if there are any bugs or any problems. Of course, there is no guarantee that this feature is up and running, and therefore it is actually not recommended to use this for production. Then, so the release pretty much goes from public preview, so private preview, public preview, going to what is called GA, general availability. So when it's general available, you will find it within Azure. There will be an SLA attached, and there will be also a cost associated with. And as you can see here, the kind of release life cycle. There is according to the fact that there might be or not be some problems or some issue, is that's how Microsoft is planning to kind of get the customer for getting inputs, feedbacks, and bugs spotting.